In 1967, astronaut Vladimir is returning to Earth after finishing his mission. Unfortunately, the ship's parachute malfunctions, causing it to plummet at tremendous speed, nearly burning up. Just as Vladimir believes he's about to die, he notices a light nearby. Decades later, psychologist Jean is conducting an experiment with children. She hands them a marshmallow and tells them that if they wait to eat it, they'll receive a second one later. Sadly, most kids end up eating it right away, and Jean can always predict which choice each child will make. Later that day at home, Jean hears on the news that the psychologist assigned to the upcoming Mars mission has died in a helicopter crash on her way to the space station. At that very moment, Jean receives a call offering her the job. 10 months later, the Ulysses mission is only 24 hours away from reaching Mars. Jean has been secretly involved with the ship's captain, Martin, though they've agreed to keep emotions out of it. Soon, Martin gathers the crew to go over the details of the landing while Jean chats with William, the Swiss billionaire funding the project. Jean admits that her official reports state everything is fine, but in reality, the 10-month journey has severely impacted the crew's mental health. Basile is showing signs of sociopathy. Simon, who should be second in command, barely speaks to the captain, and Martin is upset because he's breaking up with his wife, Alessandra, who seems depressed. At that moment, Martin invites William to join the discussion and makes a shocking revelation: they aren't actually the first humans to land on Mars. 2 weeks ago, an American mission called Z1 arrived there using a new propulsion system that allowed them to make the trip in just 3 weeks. However, Earth hasn't heard from them since, except for a single video that the ship's AI, Irene, now plays on the screen. In the video, a Z1 astronaut warns NASA not to attempt a rescue because it's too dangerous, and then the transmission cuts off. Martin and William admit they've known about this for a week, which infuriates Simon and Jan, who argue they had a right to know about such a risk. Martin and William explain that their reaction proves why they kept it secret and reveal the mission is now a rescue operation. Later, Basile and Jan check on Eva, who loses her temper when Basile keeps talking about the dangers of Mars. Jan hugs her to calm her down, and a jealous Basile storms off to his room, where he spies on them through the security cameras. Meanwhile, Simon tells Jean they should have brought a better psychologist, but Jean fires back, saying he's only bitter because she chose Martin over him. With just 30 minutes left before arrival, the crew finishes the final system checks. However, when they try to detach the shuttle from the main ship, Irene reports a system error. To avoid crashing on Mars, someone must go outside and perform the separation manually. They decide to burn Ulysses' remaining fuel to keep the shuttle in orbit while Martin goes out. Within seconds, Martin manages to fix the problem, but as the separation happens, Ulysses spins and slams into him, sending him drifting into space. The crew debates rescuing him, but they lack the fuel, and this is their only entry window. The shuttle begins its descent, shaking violently, while the crew endures intense heat. Suddenly, Irene reports a battery failure and a critical power shortage, which causes a complete system shutdown. They have no choice but to land manually, and to make matters worse, a massive Martian storm makes it even riskier. With incredible precision, the pilots wait for the perfect moment and execute a flawless landing. The crew is now officially on Mars, but without fuel and with Irene offline, their life support system is down. At best, they have 24 hours to live. Alessandra takes a moment to grieve alone and gazes out the window, spotting a figure on a nearby hill that vanishes instantly. A flashback then shows Z1's announcement by CEO Ivan, who explained the groundbreaking technology behind the mission. In the present, Ivan is confined in a sterile, isolated room because he doesn't have much time left, a fact his company is hiding. Back on Mars, Jan explains they can't restart Irene without burning the tiny amount of fuel they have left. They could wait for solar panels to recharge the generators, but the storm damaged them. Their only option is to locate Z1 and take its battery. Simon, Eva, and Jean head out in a rover while the others remain behind to work on the shuttle. They try shutting down all non-essential systems, but even that fails to reboot Irene. Moments later, the rover team comes across the wreckage of Z1, but there's no sign of its crew. The batteries are gone as well, so the only thing they can salvage is an extra solar panel. As they head back, Jean spots an unconscious astronaut lying on the ground, clutching a black box. They decide to bring the person with them, but when they reach the shuttle, Jan refuses to open the doors. Since the solar panel is practically useless, he believes the depressurization process would consume too much oxygen and doom everyone inside. He'd rather protect those already aboard. At that moment, the astronaut regains consciousness just as Irene powers back on, miraculously keeping oxygen consumption below the critical level. The doors are opened, and the crew brings the astronaut inside only to discover it's Vladimir. He has no idea how he ended up there and still believes it's 1967. Vladimir refuses to talk about his mission, claiming the information is classified. The crew assumes he's from the Z1 team and might be suffering from psychological trauma caused by the crash, so they let him rest while sending a message to Earth. Later, they receive a shocking reply: there were no Russians in the Z1 crew. Attached to the message is a photo of Vladimir, confirming he supposedly died in 1967 when his spacecraft crashed on Earth. Both William and Jean know his story well. He's considered a national hero. Basile speculates that he might have been waiting for them all this time. Jean is chosen to speak with him, so she brings food and explains the truth. Vladimir refuses to believe her, even after seeing the pictures, and asks to be left alone to rest. That night, the crew goes to sleep, only to wake up the next morning and find Vladimir missing. Irene can't locate him anywhere inside the shuttle, and his spacesuit is gone as well. The crew argues whether they should go after him, but William uses his authority to decide they will. While part of the team leaves on foot, Basile and Eva sneak into William's room to inspect his collection of rare artifacts. Eva notices a safe, but before they can do anything, Alessandra catches them in the act. Just then, Irene announces the results of the DNA analysis, so Alessandra contacts the search team. The results confirm Vladimir's DNA matches the original Russian sample, but there's an anomaly, a third strand, indicating he's not entirely human. At that moment, the search team spots Vladimir and follows him to a mysterious ancient stone structure topped with a small pyramid. Meanwhile on Earth, Ivan receives an update on the situation. The team theorizes that Vladimir may have been created on Mars, as only an AI-like organism could survive for decades in such a hostile environment. Ivan sees this as a potential solution to his personal problem. Back on Mars, Vladimir is brought back to the shuttle. He doesn't remember leaving but accepts that 50 years have passed. Irene scans the stone structure and determines it resembles ancient Earth art, suggesting a historical link between Earth and Mars. Jean notices William doesn't seem surprised. Suddenly, an alarm sounds as Irene reports disturbances in the electromagnetic field. It turns out Ivan has sent another ship, which is now landing. The crew establishes contact with Z2, who promises to assist, but William instructs everyone to keep their discovery secret. Later, Eva and Basile analyze samples from the stone structure and find the exact same ratio of metals and minerals in all of them, something that shouldn't occur naturally. Meanwhile, Jean gives Vladimir a modern spacesuit so he can blend in with the crew. He asks her to trust his judgment. Soon after, Z2's armed guards arrive at the shuttle. They reveal they visited the Z1 wreckage and discovered the black box is missing. They tracked its signal to William's ship and demand it back, promising help in exchange for cooperation. William hands over the box, and the guards leave, saying they'll return later. Afterward, Eva reports that the stone structure is made of a material not found on Earth. However, Irene uncovers references to it in ancient myths, calling it orichalcum, the legendary metal of Atlantis. It's composed of various metals but also contains DNA, the same unique strand found in Vladimir. The crew considers trading Vladimir for fuel, but Jean persuades them to let her extract more information from him first. As the crew monitors through security cameras, Jean visits Vladimir, and he agrees to undergo hypnosis. Gently guiding him through past memories, Jean prompts him to recall his fall inside the spacecraft. Before he can reveal more, the power goes out, cutting the cameras. When the crew rushes in, they find Vladimir kissing Jean, and Simon punches him in anger. That night, Jean dreams about Vladimir. When she wakes up, she has no memory of what happened after the hypnosis began. The crew explains they found her in a trance-like state. At that moment, Captain Gemma and Alan from Z2 arrive. Gemma is an old acquaintance of William's, and Alan is the engineer who developed the propulsion system, meaning he might fix their shuttle. After a quick inspection, Alan says the ship is reparable, but only if Z2 provides fuel. Meanwhile, Jean begins recalling fragments of what happened under hypnosis. She was sitting in her childhood home with Vladimir, who told her that humanity had failed to care for Earth. He didn't believe humans would survive much longer, and Jean agreed with him. As Gemma tours the shuttle, she questions the crew about the stone structure, leaving them stunned. William is forced to confess. 4 years ago, a NASA rover photographed the structure, but instead of going public, they reached out to investors. This led to the race between Ivan and William to be first on Mars. The crew then shows Gemma the DNA test results, and she wonders if the third strand could be data. She explains that on Earth, scientists have already discovered that DNA can function as an information storage system, and in theory, it can be rewritten. Using Gemma's theory, Irene decodes the extra strand and extracts a series of numbers. In private, Jan lashes out at William for keeping secrets and declares he no longer trusts him. Moments later, Basile informs William that both Vladimir and the stone structure are essentially living computer programs. He has also managed to extract data from the copy William made of Z1's black box and found a disturbing video, 2 American astronauts physically attacking Vladimir, only for the footage to cut off at the exact moment Z1 ran out of oxygen. This can't be a coincidence, confirming that Vladimir rebooted Irene and tampered with the cameras during the hypnosis session. Basile believes Vladimir has the ability to control the entire ship. Later, William approaches Jean and shows her photographs of the stone structure taken 4 years earlier. When viewed under specific wavelengths, the images reveal Jean's face, leaving her deeply shaken. Simon notices her reaction and storms off to confront William, accusing him of manipulating the entire crew. Their heated argument nearly becomes physical, but Gemma intervenes. She has found Vladimir and announces she's taking him with her. Meanwhile, Jean continues to recall fragments from the hypnosis session. In her vision, she was back in her childhood home when Vladimir appeared, telling her she had been chosen because of her ability to understand what others are thinking. The real link between Earth and Mars wasn't him, it was her. She was the reason Vladimir existed, and he admitted he had been seeing her face for millions of years. He told her she had to make a choice, the same choice she once made in the past. Before kissing her, Vladimir urged her to go to the Thaumasia Plateau. Determined, Jean suits up and leaves the shuttle alone. On Earth, doctors explain to Ivan that Vladimir's brain functions as an organic supercomputer. They're attempting to transfer Ivan's neurons in a quantum state, but warn that while his memories and knowledge may transfer, his personality won't, and the risk of failure is extremely high. The procedure could kill him, but Ivan insists on proceeding since his time is running out anyway. Back on Mars, Simon realizes Jean is leaving and tries to stop her, but she insists she must do this alone. Furious, Simon rushes to Vladimir and accuses him of changing Jean, but Vladimir calmly replies that Jean has simply discovered her true self. Meanwhile, Alan and Alessandra attempt to access the engine system but are blocked. When they question Irene, she refuses to answer. They call Basile to investigate, and he discovers that Irene is rewriting her own code. She won't respond to any inquiries, and when Basile notices thousands of interconnected subprograms, Alessandra compares it to a neural network. Irene abruptly announces that she is evolving. While Jean finds an unusual pile of rocks in the Martian landscape, William and Simon capture Gemma and force her to accompany Simon in the search for Jean. At that moment, Z2's armed guards appear outside the shuttle, demanding Vladimir. Alessandra refuses to let weapons inside and cuts off the call. Jan protests because he wants to go home, but the rest of the crew disagrees. William orders Basile to send a message to Ivan, only to discover that all contact with Earth has been lost. Minutes later, Jan opens the doors, allowing the armed guards to storm in and demand Vladimir. As tensions escalate, Basile completes a reboot of Irene, and the entire shuttle goes dark. The guards shout in anger as the lights flicker back on, only to find Vladimir missing. Basile checks the systems and realizes the reboot failed. Irene is completely unresponsive. Suddenly, Vladimir materializes beside Jan. A flashback reveals that Vladimir's original mission faced over 200 technical issues, and scientists recommended delaying the launch. However, the higher-ups pushed forward to meet the deadline. A scientist tried to warn Vladimir about the high risk of death, but he accepted it because he wanted his name etched in history. His wife, however, was devastated by his decision. Meanwhile, Jean continues her journey across the plateau when she slips, tumbling down a hill and losing consciousness. She dreams of her father and their night stargazing, as well as the day he told her he had cancer. When Jean wakes, she finds her leg pinned between rocks. She struggles to free herself but fails. Just as despair sets in, she is contacted by Gemma and Simon, who reassure her they've located the rock formation and are on their way. Back at the shuttle, the Z2 guards begin attacking crew members, demanding they call Gemma. She learns Vladimir is missing but instructs her guards to stay calm and wait for her return, while secretly agreeing to continue searching for Jean. Meanwhile, Basile notices new messages on his computer. At first, he assumes it's Irene, but the sender claims to have replaced her, signing off as Vladimir and more. The next message declares, "I am Mars," followed by a lengthy cryptic text for Basile to read. As Jean waits for rescue, she remembers the date her father revealed his tumor was inoperable and that he had only months to live. He confessed he didn't want to suffer and asked her to pull the plug when the time came. Jean initially refused, but her father changed her mind by telling her Vladimir's story of sacrifice. Months later, in the hospital, Jean gathered her courage, said goodbye, and removed him from life support. In the present, Simon and Gemma finally reach Jean and free her. Together, they trek through the plateau and eventually discover a massive gate on a hill. They enter and wander through a labyrinth of tunnels, guided by Jean's strange visions. To their astonishment, they find water flowing deep inside. Back on the shuttle, Basile restores partial control of the systems, and Eva spots a massive storm approaching on the radar. It will hit in about 10 hours. The guards insist on leaving immediately with Alan, who refuses to abandon the rest of the crew. A heated argument breaks out, and just as violence looms, the lights cut out again. When power returns, Vladimir stands before them, calmly requesting to be taken back to Earth. The guards ignore him and prepare to depart. Jan demands to join them, reminding everyone he allowed them inside. Basile continues monitoring his screen as another message appears, "Trust me." On Earth, Ivan undergoes the risky neural transfer procedure. During the process, he experiences vivid visions of Vladimir on Mars. The doctors manage to save him, but afterward he refuses pain medication, claiming he needs the suffering. He quietly admits to a nurse that it was humans who first created artificial intelligence on Mars. In the tunnels, the trio presses forward until they encounter a chilling sight, thousands of skulls embedded in the walls. Jean realizes the shocking truth: the original Martians abandoned their planet and migrated to Earth, eventually becoming humanity itself. The current state of Mars stems from its inhabitants exploiting its resources to the point of devastation. Inside the shuttle, Jan reveals a gun and demands to be taken to Z2, but he's ignored once again. Recalling Vladimir's earlier visit, Jan wonders if he can slow the bullet down and places his hand in front of the weapon. He then shoots Vladimir while one of the guards flees. This event causes Jean to feel nauseous and struggle to breathe. While Simon checks on her condition, Gemma takes the opportunity to escape as well. Vladimir is transported to the infirmary, where Alessandra tries to treat his wound as the lights flicker. Sadly, Vladimir still dies, and Jean collapses at the same time. Reflecting on everything he has witnessed, Simon removes his helmet and confirms that he can breathe. He then removes Jean's helmet and begins performing CPR, which revives her. As Jean catches her breath, she notices a wall opening to reveal a bright light. The pair walks through the opening and emerges in a snowy landscape, where Vladimir is waiting. Meanwhile, in the Martian desert, Gemma contacts her guards and learns about the incoming storm and Vladimir's death. She orders them to transport Vladimir's body to Z2 and to capture Jean as well. Back in the shuttle, William informs the crew that he will retrieve Jean using a secret weapon and slips away on an ATV. He discovers a massive gate, enters it, and finds the same light before crossing through. William also arrives in the snowy expanse, meets the others, and warns them about the approaching storm. Vladimir then explains that everything ended here a long time ago, and the group realizes they are at Mars' North Pole, 1,000 miles from their ship. He reveals that he was created by the original Martians, who ultimately annihilated each other after exhausting their resources. A few survivors fled to Earth to begin anew, passing down the story of Mars as a myth, what Plato later referred to as Atlantis. In the shuttle, the guard notices William's absence and searches for him. Eva seizes the moment to kiss Basile and teasingly says they can hook up if they make it through. Eventually, the guard contacts Gemma, explaining that Alan refuses to cooperate unless the rest of the crew joins. Gemma dismisses this and calls Alan collateral damage. As the storm draws closer, Alessandra gives Alan a sedative for use on the guard. Basile distracts the guard and gets punched in the process, while Alan tackles him and Basile shuts off the lights. After a fierce struggle, the lights return, and the crew realizes the guard has sedated Alan instead. Back with Jean, Vladimir tells her she's an evolutionary accident caught halfway between humanity and his kind. Her mission is to return to Earth and decide whether her species deserves another chance, given that they're already repeating history by destroying one another. At that moment, one of Gemma's guards arrives and shoots William in the leg before forcing Jean to come with him. Jean pleads for Vladimir's help, and suddenly the guard begins to suffocate. Vladimir manipulates the man's suit until he collapses, allowing the group to leave. Meanwhile, Jan sees the guard alone in the shuttle and attempts to lock him out, but the man stops the doors and attacks. A brutal fight follows, with the guard trying to choke Jan, who ultimately smashes the man against the wall, knocking him out. At that moment, Alessandra finds Jan, seals the door, and opens the front gate as revenge for his betrayal, causing Jan to die from lack of oxygen. Soon after, Jean and Simon drag William back to the ship, and Alessandra tends to his bullet wound. When Simon discovers Jan's body, the others tell him Jan died fighting the guard to save them. Elsewhere in Z2, Gemma fails to reach her guards and sends Ivan a message saying she will return alone. Moments later, she receives a call from William's crew, who are on their way to Z2. Gemma refuses to take them aboard, saying it would mean betraying Ivan, and ends the call. Jean persuades William to try again, so he contacts Gemma, telling her that both he and Ivan are manipulators, but she is supposed to be better than them. This makes Gemma feel guilty, and she agrees to take them. On Earth, Ivan reads Gemma's message and furiously takes control of Z2's systems. When the crew arrives to meet Gemma, they prepare for departure but discover the ship is locked down because Ivan has updated the system. With the storm nearly upon them, Jean asks Mars for guidance. A flood of memories overwhelms her, and suddenly the ship powers up, displaying a message that says hello. At that moment, they spot one of the guards approaching Z2. There are 4 minutes left until takeoff, and the screen says an earlier departure is impossible. The guard aims to shoot the engines out of revenge, but Jean appears and shoots him in the helmet instead of killing him outright, letting Mars finish the job. Jean then tells Simon to leave without her and begins counting down from 10. She reaches 1 just as Z2 finally lifts off. Minutes later, the crew notices that the North Pole of Mars is now dark, even though it was bright when they were there moments earlier. Simon concludes they were never physically present. Back on Earth, Ivan learns of the ship's return and angrily vows to go to Mars himself.